Hello and welcome to the Not Too Shabby YouTube channel. My name is Lynn, or LV Handcrafted, here on YouTube, and today I will be making a set of 4 cards. I've already chosen one pattern paper from the Flowery Meadow 6x6 paper pad. This is part of the April 2024 paper pad club, and this is the paper pad that does not have coordinating ephemera pack that goes with it, but instead one of the printed designs is actually a cut apart page. So that page has all sorts of images that you can, if you want, cut out and use as your focal images. And if you don't want, you can always flip to the back side and use the pattern that's on the back. So that's the lovely thing about Not Too Shabby papers. They are double-sided, and so that gives you a lot of different variety to choose from. And in particular, I always recommend double-sided pattern papers with my mini one-sheet wonders, because then for the sketches where you're using multiple pieces from that same pattern paper, you can kind of mix and match. You can use, front side, back side together, or just choose one or the other. If you're not familiar with my mini one-sheet wonders, it's basically a guide where I show you how to cut a single sheet of pattern paper and then create a set of cards with it. And in this case, it's 4 cards that you can create. The cards are, 3 of them anyways, have a very similar but not identical sort of pattern or layout to it. And they are all sort of loosely based on this very wonky diagonal sort of blocking of trapezoids, basically. So the cutting guide, which if you want to check it out, it's on my channel. I have a tutorial video on how to make these cuts, but you can actually do this from scraps too. You don't actually need a full sheet of 6x6 like I'm using. But each of the trapezoids, the way that I've designed my cuts, each of these pieces actually has 2 right angles. So 2 90-degree angles, which means that, as you saw just a moment ago, you can really rotate these, play around with them, and mix and match them together. So on this card, for example, I am going to use sort of like the A side, the flowery side for one of these blocks. And then I'm going to flip to the back side and use that for the adjacent block. And so 3 of the card sketches that you'll be able to make with this particular mini one-sheet wonder will share a very similar pattern. They're not going to be identical because it just depends on how you choose to use or how you choose to position these trapezoids, because like I mentioned, you do have 2 90-degree angles on each of these, which gives you the option of, which corner you want to place it in. And it really changes the vibe of a card too, because you can have the slant going, upwards, going, to the left, to the right, downwards, etc. It really has because it's got that sort of wonky angle to it. It has a little bit of sort of movement in the card. And I am using just thin strips of sometimes pattern paper, sometimes solid color cardstock, to just add a nice little border between the pattern papers and that big, section of white that's on this panel. Now I'm not working directly on my card base. This is actually a panel that's 4 inches by 5 1/4. So when this goes onto my card base, there's actually going to be a thin border all the way around that's visible. And for this particular sketch and the next one, I only use one of those trapezoid pieces from the initial 6x6 sheet that I cut. And then for that smaller block that I added, that's actually just some scrap from the same paper pad, but it was from an earlier crafty session where I crafted with this paper pad, and I just had a bit left over, so I decided to use that here. This sort of layout with these like wonky, sort of askewed patterns, it's great for leftovers, great for scraps. If you don't have a perfect square, perfect rectangle, you might find that you've got just enough to fit into one of these little kind of blocky areas. And initially, I had pulled out a lot of things that were kind of in the same color palette. It's just so that I had a bunch of things I could reach for as I'm putting these cards together. Now, what I like to do whenever I'm doing one of my mini one-sheet wonders is that I do the cut first, and then I like to kind of assemble the sketch with its sort of foundational layout. And then as the next pass, I will decorate them all. So I don't actually complete like one card end to end. I sort of take it in phases. And so in this phase, I'm just putting together the 4 cards loosely according to the sketch. And then the fun will begin where I can just focus on decorating. I wish I had this really lovely sort of light lilac kind of lavender color, because I did end up sacrificing a bit of those cutter part pages, which thankfully you get a lot of in this particular paper pad. I think you get 4 of each of the designs, which is really nice. It's usually more than what I need, but I did end up using the B side on some of those. So I had to sacrifice, I think 2 sheets of those cut apart pages. Not fully, but still. It felt like quite a sacrifice. It is nice that the papers are double-sided, because you can choose to use them however you'd like, whether you want to use the cut aparts or you want to use the pattern that's on the back. It just so happened that the pattern on the back was the perfect color, of course, and I didn't have everything that I have. Purple is such a tricky color, because everything that I have in purples, it does tend a little bit more towards the blue, like a bluey purple, versus a more reddish, plummy purple. And with this paper pad, I think these purples skew a little bit more towards the red. And for me, personal preference, folks know that teal is my favorite color, and blue as a category is my favorite. And so I tend to like more bluey purples, and so that tends to be what I have in my stash. So I did have to sacrifice some of those cut apart pages. Thank goodness we get so many, because I still had enough left over to create the focal areas for my cards later. And here with this design, this is another design that I really like. It's another very kind of loosey-goosey one, because you can kind of angle these triangular pieces however you'd like. You can have them coming from any corner, really. I don't know why, but I tend to feel like it's a little bit more natural to come for the radiating rays to come from that bottom left corner. I always gravitate to putting my circle there as a way of having my focal area be the source, sort of where these rays are shining from. But really, the reality is you could have these coming from any which corner that you want. It's really flexible, especially if like I am in this case, if you use non-directional paper, because if you have a directional paper, then it actually might dictate which corner in order to orient it so that it makes sense. But if you're using non-directional papers like I am, it's really easy. You have a lot of flexibility. And since the other cards that I made were so flower heavy with the A side of the pattern paper, I thought this would be a good one to keep kind of simple, keep very monochromatic. So I'm almost using white as an accent color here because I used some Love from Lizzie's pinstripe stickers in white, and I bordered everything in white as well. So I've got my mini One Sheet Wonder printable here so that you can kind of see all 4 sketches the way that they were initially designed to be used. But you can see because I've used a directional paper, that's sort of dictated where some of these blocks needed to go. And so all of my sketches today, except for this one with the radiating rays, is going to be slightly different to how I have the sketches drawn in my printable, which just goes to show that you can really make all of these your own. Now, with this particular cut apart here, this bit of greenery, it was the only one I had left. But I really wanted to balance out some greenery because I made this sort of floral cluster, but it felt weird to just have the one little bit of greenery popping out from one side. I wanted a little bit of green on the other side too. So what I did was I just trimmed it down a little bit and separated it, which you should always feel free to do with your ephemera, with these cut aparts as well. Just snip into them and modify them to work on your card. And then I've got these 2 deers left. This one I like because it's a scene in and of itself, so you don't really need much more than just that one cut apart, which is great because I'm down to only just a few. So thankfully I had enough to finish the 4 cards, but I think I pretty much used up everything that I had left because I did sacrifice a couple of pages as backgrounds for my earlier cards. And this particular little cluster that I created here, I just really loved the idea of this little deer just sort of curled up, taking a nap in a sort of like in a bed of flowers. And so I just threw everything that I had left and made this really large cluster of florals. I mean, these printables are just gorgeous. The flowers are stunning, and I love working with ephemera and cut aparts like these because you don't have to spend all your time coloring up these images. You can just play with them and have a fun time collaging them up and mixing and matching and creating your own little scenes. So here's a final close-up look at all of my cards today. I had a ton of fun crafting with this month's paper pad club, and it was a blast to get to do my mini One Sheet Wonder with a directional paper, which I hadn't done yet, and as well kind of explore some different looks, some different layouts to how I originally designed the mini One Sheet Wonder. So it just goes to show it's always fun to kind of play around with things, change things up a little bit. And for sketches like this, I feel like it's so flexible. You can really use anything that you have in your stash. Great scrap buster because you can see each of the individual blocks of pattern paper aren't very big. So you can definitely kind of use this sketch as a scrap busting layout as well. I hope that you enjoyed my cards today. And again, if you want to see actually how to cut these pieces, you can pop on over to mine, and I've got a tutorial video showing exactly how to do that. And if you are a member of my channel, you can download that printable for free. Thanks so much for joining me today. And until next time, happy crafting and have a fabulous day. Bye.